last review I did, I said that I would be reading Raven's Blood by Anthony Ryan, and I didn't have time for this, and to be honest, I found out I didn't have time for this one either, so here we are. This was supposed to be a quick and short read, but I forgot that this book was written over 100 years ago, and the way it's written and it's just so different, so it took me a while to get into that. Anyways, why do a review of a book like The Time Machine? Well, other than not everyone having read the book, even though they should, it is to me an insanely interesting book. H.G. Wells is one of the earliest writers of modern science fiction, and his stories are significantly different from what modern science fiction is today. But at the same time, you can clearly tell a lot of modern stories get their inspiration from him. You can also see reference to specifically his time machine in nearly any story that has one. For me, the wildest example is like Phineas and Ferb, and it just shows how influential he really is when it comes down to it. And as a kid, when I watched Phineas and Ferb and saw the time machine and I understood it was a time machine, it just shows how well he hit the spot. Now, the story in itself is actually really short. It's only about 120 pages or so. And that means this will be the shortest review on the channel. That's not a YouTube short, and that's okay. I got a lot of projects coming up, including some bookbinding, some leatherwork, and more reviews. So a shorter review is nice for a change. The Time Machine was originally published from January to May of 1895 in the New Review. And that's because it was published serialized and not as a book. It was then in May of 1895, so after it was finished in the New Review, then published as a book. On Goodreads, it stands at a 3.89 out of 5 with over 500,000 ratings, but not even 20,000 reviews, which is wild when you think about it. Both because it's such a classic, but also just due to the scale, difference in numbers. And I think the score is a bit on the low side. I would say it should be between 4 and 5, possibly closer to 4, but not below 4. For the version I have, I actually hate this cover. I think it's a boring cover. And the main reason why I hate it is because of this SF Masterworks and the recommendation quote. Remove those two and I think it would be such a cool cover. I love the browns and yellows and oranges. I think it works so well. It makes it's supposed to be paper, it's supposed to be technical drawing, what we're seeing in the background, but what I really like is it makes the time machine itself stand out, but it's not popping out in your face. So it's clear to see what it is, but it's not screaming in your face. It's kinda stylishly standing out to you. I won't be dividing this story into segments, given the length of the book, but I will be talking about things in mostly order of appearance. I have to say it because I might mess up some things, but I tried to keep it in order of appearance. The book is odd in the way that it's written. It's written as if Wells is telling us the story that the time traveler is telling him, which is probably the case and a stylistic choice, but it's weird because you could have the same traveler tell us the story directly without Wells as the middleman, and that would work too. What is weird is then also how objective the writing is. If you read a lot of books from this time, there's a certain amount of flowing to the language using other words than we use today, like stupendous and extreme. Not extreme, but let's see if we quickly find one. Probably not. But no, it's written peculiar. It's not a word you would really see today. So it does use in other words and other style, and it does have a lot of the flowing language, very literary in a way, you can say it like that. But then if you really think about this book specifically, it's still kinda devoid of emotions in the way the story is told. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of emotions, but they're told in the most sterilized way. Even the Weena is described as being in love and feeling emotions, very clinically described. It works really well, but it's also kind of weird. It works well because it is a scientist telling us the story, so he is just sticking to like the certain aspect, the facts. And the other thing I noted that I found a bit odd was the lack of names, or mostly a few characters are named, which is also weird, and because they're not really that important. So, and even those that are named are mainly described by their profession, like then you get the name and then the profession anyways. And that's because the characters are not important. We just need to see this is a story of rich, white and educated men talking. And it's a little jarring, especially because there are some dated reference, like when the time traveler says people from Africa wouldn't understand modern things like post systems. You can tell it's a product of its time because of stuff like that. But what is important is, I don't think it was an accident that all the characters are from the upper class. Because the story is a dystopian story, set to show why we need to abolish the class divisions. And you need the people to realize and be told, like you need the upper class to be told all that stuff. We need to see the time traveler hanging with the people who in a thousand of years will become human cattle. Because if you were speaking to like the farmer or the blacksmith or the butler, for instance, it would not have the same effect, because they would be like, oh yeah, we need to abolish it. So, had this book been written in modern times, it would have easily been 600 pages epic science fiction, and we will get way more world building, exploration and description of what's going on. We might get multiple POVs even, might get a little from Venus' point of view, for instance. Maybe multiple trips. But I like we get this one trip and that the world building and descriptions are so sparse. It's a man recalling what he saw after doing the most fantastic thing possible and most of the time being scared. So of course he won't get a detailed pages long description of how it looked when he crawled down to where the Morlock? I think that's what they call it. They call it like Morlock or something like that. Morlocks, yeah. Of course we wouldn't, he's scared of life, of course he wouldn't notice all the small details. Because what he saw were the handles and darkness, and that's it. But that's not what you would get today. You would get way more about like the rust, how it's covered, you would get like the design and all that stuff. And it is a surprisingly sad and dark story. Even the time traveler notes that he expected the future to be perfect, but it isn't. Humans have devolved into two distinct species, and one is the cattle and the other hunts it. And it's really interesting to me. And yeah, that's really all I have to talk about story, so let's get to the conclusion. I know I didn't talk about the story itself of what happened, or the fact that the Eloi spent their days dancing, frolicking and having sex. And that is because to me the setting behind how it was written and what stood out to me and what that means. Especially when it comes to seeing it from a modern day view 100 years later. Is this book for everyone? No. But I like it a lot. And I think you should read it, especially if you are into science fiction and dystopian, because it kinda is groundbreaking for its time. It really did set a lot of modern trends we see. And contrary to like 1984 or other dystopian novels, this one is so far out in the future that we don't even have Big Brother watching us, and that's an interesting premise. So it's I would love for everybody to read it. I think it's super interesting, but I do acknowledge it's also a weird book, so it's not gonna be for everyone. Then yeah, that's